Guy, communication is what we're talking about today. Are you pumped?
Dude, I think it's one of the most important things if we're talking about business, relationships. And I think that, this talk will be really good. And hopefully we can come up with some good strategies that people can use in order to improve their communication and improve their work life and relationship life, hopefully.
Yes, I agree. Communication is essential in so many things. Yeah, especially at a human level, like the ability to communicate ideas, emotions, thoughts, feelings, all of those different things. And then at like a completely different level in machine learning and things like that, the ability to communicate and propagate messages through a system is also very important and a key aspect in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So like it's crazy how pervasive communication is, and in forms that are not sort of as familiar as what we're used to with human communication, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I'm surprised how many people that you meet, not on a day-to-day basis, but on a pretty consistent basis, that are lacking a lot of communication skills. And this is a topic that's always been really something that's been really interesting to me, because it's so many times you hear of situations where there's an issue in a relationship or an issue at work, and you get one side of the story, then you get the other person's side of the story. But there's really three sides to every story. It's what I think happened, what you think happened, and what actually happened, right? And I'm always curious, like, where is that disconnect? Why is there so much disconnect? Why can't we figure out what actually happened, and why is there so many disagreements, and why is it so difficult to come to a solution with certain types of people, right? And I've always been really blown away by that. Have you had a similar experience?
Yes, definitely. So yeah, you want to jump straight in the deep end, right off the high block, right into the deep end. So what you said, yeah, that's that's true. In the sense that, yeah, like you can have something happen, you could have two observers that witness that thing happening, and they could both see very different things. And so, listening to one person's story, you're going to get their point of view. The key point, or the key word there is, the key two words are point, or three words, point of view. And then the other person's point of view as well. And then, like you said, the third thing, which is what actually happened. The crazy thing about what actually happened is that, like, it kind of depends on the observer, which is why you can have those two different perspectives of the same thing, if that kind of makes sense. So, because each of us is a unique observer, where, we are similar but different, and we will pass or interpret the universe or things that happen in the universe as being different. So yeah, like that's the sort of easy over the top answer. But this comes into like reference frames and what does it mean to be an observer and perspective and all that different stuff. And this is like one of the coolest things that I've sort of come to learn is it really does, what you see is dictated by how you're choosing to look at it or how you're looking at it. And there's a lot of room there for you to make choices to see things differently if you wish to.
There's been a bunch of times where my wife has said to me, but Daniel, I did tell you that and you responded. And I'm thinking, man, what the fuck? Like, why don't I remember what's going on? Because I pride myself on being a really good communicator and a really good listener, but it doesn't matter. It still happens to me, right? And I'm thinking, I can't recall the moment, and I feel kind of stupid in the situation. And I just have to believe that what she's saying is true and move on. And there's been so many times where it's a situation like, but I thought you said this. I did, but this is what I meant. I meant something else. And like, well, I didn't think you meant it that way, right? Well, if you don't understand something, then you need to ask me. Well, but I did understand. At least I thought I did, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do to always make sure that the person receiving the message is understanding what we're saying and not make it annoying, because if you have to repeat everything you ever say to somebody until they understand it, it could be annoying.
So, Richard Feynman has a good sort of heuristic or way to test if you really understand something, and it's to be able to teach it to a child, or to communicate it to a child. So, we can sort of take that and go with language, and this is a really interesting thing because it's fundamentally error correction, right? So I can communicate something to you, and I can know or think I know what I'm trying to communicate, right? But the words that I choose and the way I say it, for you to be able to interpret or understand, you have to make a prediction. Your brain is making a prediction about what it is I'm saying, about the words I'm using, what I'm meaning with them, and everything else. So in that, we can already see that there's a huge amount of error that can occur, right? And if I'm making a false prediction about something you're saying, well, I'll interpret it differently to how you intended it, which in this case we would say would be wrong, right? So one way to combat this would be to, as you're communicating to somebody, then getting that person to say it back to you in their own words to see if they actually do understand or if they've interpreted it in a different way. And one reason this occurs regularly is because although, there are definitions for words, each person's understanding or resolution of a definition, or the degree at which they are aware of the definition of a word is different, right? So, we all take for granted that when someone says they're angry, they're really angry. But sometimes they might not be angry. They might be a different thing. They just don't have the words to explain it, so they default to using angry or something like that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, you have to get the person to repeat it back to you in a way to make sure that they're understanding some sort of message that you're trying to get across to them, right? And I agree. I think that's like super, super effective especially when we're talking about something really important, right? Because having day-to-day communication, just like quick things here and there, it can be mundane, just sort of, are you sure you understood what I said? Can you repeat it back to me? It can become a little bit, I think, stressful if it's something constant. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I think that technique is seriously useful if it's something really important. Like if we're talking about, something we're at work, or an important plan that you're making with your spouse or with your friends.
Yeah, so definitely is very important and can be incredibly tedious. But the key point is you don't want them to just parrot back to you the words that you said, right? That doesn't communicate to you that they understand what you're saying. That just communicates that they can replicate the words, right? That's that parrot, okay? And you don't want people to just parrot things back to you. That's annoying. Ideally, you're getting them to say it back to you in their own words in a way that shows that they understand what you're saying, which is why they could reformulate, it in a different, or using different words or different language, they could reformulate it back to you in another way. That shows that they actually do understand, because they were able to take what you said, transform it into another way of saying it, and then say it back to you, right? So yes, that process will be incredibly tedious if you have to do it for everything. Okay, but the beautiful thing about this is it's a calibration tool. By trying to mutually understand each other, or trying to develop a mutual understanding of each other and how each person communicates, their different styles and the way that they use words, is that over time, you do it less and less and less. So initially, you might have to do it quite often, right? Like regularly. And the more you do it and the more stringent you are, like the more willing you are to take the time to slow down and align each other or calibrate each other to develop a mutual understanding, the less you have to do it over time.
I agree. I've actually experienced with that with our friends, where for some reason we're just on the same wavelength because we've been friends for so long that we have a really high level of understanding. And I like to refer to as we're connected on a higher state of consciousness, because we've been around each other so much that we have, essentially a really high understanding of how each one of us communicates and what we're trying to communicate to the other person. Sort of like we're almost on the same page and thinking the same thing at times.
Correct. And so a lot of that is also that communication is not just verbal. There's so many other ways to communicate. Like, so you have, verbal communication, written communication, you have non-verbal communication like body language, eyes, etc. And one of what you just mentioned there about that, like getting in sync with people or really developing a deep understanding of each other in that regard, is sometimes you don't even need to communicate with words, right? Like you can just give a look, or you can just like do a subtle eye movement or something like that that tells you everything you need to know, because you spent so much time calibrating, right? And developing a mutual understanding of each other's communication styles. And also you sort of develop an idea of how people think about things, right? And it's never perfect. You can't know exactly what someone's thinking or how they're thinking about it or how they're feeling, but you can approximate it quite well in some circumstances.
I don't know if you ever thought about this, Rubes, but I find that culturally, certain cultures define how people communicate. So I want to just mention the Western culture first, right? So we'll include Canada, US, Australia. Are those sort of like a more Western style culture?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could just sum it up, just say like the white dogs.
People who speak English, right, as a first language. People who speak English as a first language, I found, because living in a different culture and in a country that speaks Spanish, I've really, this has amplified this, where I've noticed that people who speak English will speak somewhat contextually. I don't know if that's the right word, but you really have to read in between the lines with the way that people speak English. Like things aren't super direct or super clear, but at the same time, it is clear because we've become so accustomed to needing to read between the lines, because English speakers are sort of, like we speak in codes and we speak in, we use like one word for many different circumstances. Like there isn't like one specific word for each circumstance. Like in many cases in Spanish, it's that way. In English, we're able to utilize words in many different ways. Like, for example, like fuck. Like the word fuck is so goddamn versatile. Like there's like a million ways to use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, more than that. But yes, I know what you mean.
You could be with your buddy and you're like, holy fuck. And your buddy knows exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, whoa, yep. Holy fuck, guy. That's it. And you're like, yeah, holy fuck, guy. And we both are on the same page. That's crazy.
Yeah. So what you just touched on is the difference between, what is it? Denotative and connotative. Connotative. Oh my God. I'm butchering. Hold on. Give me 1 sec. I'll double check it. Yeah. Denotative and connotative. Denotative and connotative. That's the difference. Okay. So, denotative. Oh my God.
I've actually never heard of either word, bro. So don't even worry about it.
Okay. So something, if something is, denotative, right? My God, I can't believe I'm struggling to pronounce that word. It means the true meaning of the word, right? Like it's the real meaning of that word. It's sort of, denoting that is the literal meaning of that, right? Whereas connotative is the sort of second meaning of the word. Okay, and we use connotative so much, right? That so much of the words we use in English are very connotative. And that's context dependent, right? They're very contextually dependent. And so, there's a lot of nuance there, right? It makes it a little bit harder to use, but it also provides you this sort of freedom with the language as well. So it's very interesting how that happens.
Yeah. And like I was saying, in Spanish, I've noticed that it's less contextual. Connotative? Is that the word?
connotative. So that means the second meaning of words, like not the true meaning. Whereas denotative is the real meaning. It's the literal meaning of that word.
So, it's not an absolute thing. Like, obviously, there's a little bit of that in Spanish, but I find there's a lot less, which has really opened my eyes in communication and how communication is like a different thing where I live. And it's been a little bit difficult to get on that same wavelength as my wife because I'm so used to speaking English and interacting with English speaking people and getting on the same wavelength with my friends and my family. So I'm introducing all these like new communicational variables, I guess, now. And I've had to learn a lot in Spanish. It's not only with my wife, but with like other friends I have here as well. I can't speak contextually. I have to speak very, very direct, and I have to explain everything, and also using the appropriate word in the appropriate context is vital for communication. It's really difficult. Like sometimes we'll have a meeting together and I'll be understanding what a potential client or a business partner is saying in the moment. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Oh, see, right. Like, all right, cool. And then we'll leave. And Miss Bunny's like, yo, I don't think you understood this one part because you were just agreeing. Like, this is what they said and this is what this means. And I'm kind of, whoa, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. So learning the ins and outs of the culture and of the language is another key to understanding and communication.
Yeah. So what you just said though, like you said, is it's actually really hard for you. But part of the reason it's so hard for you is one, it's new, but two, you're coming from a place where you had already done all that work quite early on in your life, right? And it didn't seem hard because it's so long ago. And so then you got used to the fact that you've grown up in a similar circumstance with these people, and you guys are, like you vibe together, so you mutually understand each other. And so communication becomes a lot easier because there's so much of it that you don't even have to think about or worry about because you sort of all share a similar sort of meaning and understand each other's nuances and intricacies, right? And then going to somewhere where that's completely different and a new language and with different cultural norms and different, again, the language is different. So the grammars and the way that they point to things or use things is very different. So it's forcing you to have to use parts of your brain that probably haven't been used for quite some time, just because it was so easy, right? Back where you were with your group of friends, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. And I find, I mean, I don't want to say it's easier to communicate in English because obviously I'm biased. It's impossible for me to say that, but I will say that native Spanish speakers tell me that learning English is easier than an English speaker learning Spanish. I don't know how they would be able to say that, but that's what I've been told. I think the English language has a lot of strong sounds in it, like the T sound is strong, right? And Spanish doesn't have like those like really like overpronounced sounds. So when Spanish people are learning how to speak English, they have a hard time with like the word test because it starts and ends with a T. And what's that?
How do they say it?
I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you. I feel like getting my wife to see if she can say it. Yeah. And the word dead as well. D's and T's are difficult. But apart from their pronunciation, they learn English significantly faster than English people learn how to speak Spanish, is what the general consensus has been. Yeah.
How do you say the word chorizo?
Chorizo?
What is it?
Well, in English, I would say chorizo.
Yeah.
Chorizo. But in Spanish, I would say chorizo.
Yeah, much better. Because in over in Australia here, mate, we've got some people that pronounce it like this. Ready?
Yeah.
Chorizo.
Chorizo. Hi, mate.
Or
I said,
chorizo.
Chorizo.
Yeah.
Chorizo. Yeah.
You're a bit ish there, mate.
But you see, English speakers do overpronounce a lot of sounds, right? Actually, Australians, what is it that you guys do? You guys sort of pronounce syllables less, right? Or how is it?
Well, sometimes we don't pronounce them at all. And then other times we really like let them hang on for ages, like a. Yeah, mate.
Yeah, mate.
We do weird stuff. We morph language in strange ways, but it's kind of fun.
It is so, it astonishes me the level of pronunciation Europeans have. Like I'm talking about like Finland, for example, Sweden, those countries around it in that area. When people from there learn English, they learn it super well. And sometimes you can't even tell that they're from there because they almost don't even have an accent. It's crazy.
Well, think about it geographically, right? They've been located in an area where there are lots of different, race or groups of Homo sapiens that have evolved over time with different languages, right? So they've sort of been embedded in this, and in Europe, you can get to so many different countries so easily, right? There's just so much diversity. Whereas out here in Australia, mate, we're down on an island. We're really a long way away. An interesting thing in Australia is the indigenous population, so the Aboriginals that live here, their languages, they had many different languages, like huge amounts of different languages, not just one sort of dialect that was so various in the different ways that it sort of was instantiated. And like I lived in an Aboriginal community for quite a few years and noticing how efficient they were at communicating information with very little effort from the mouth. That kind of makes sense. Like, so they have this incredibly sort of compressed way of communicating things that requires almost no effort to sort of say or communicate. It's very interesting how, when I first went there, I thought it was like lazy, but I was like, no, this is really efficient. This is actually fantastic. You can sort of just barely have to move your mouth or make these noises, and you can just kind of roll these sort of sounds off that are so easy to do.
What do you?
Hey, you go.
What do you call those guys that have a puppet and the puppet talks and they don't move their mouths with it? Oh, ventriloquists.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, those guys would make solid ventriloquists.
Yes. One of my favorite words. So you mentioned one earlier, and we've got to intro the pod. So we'll intro the pod after this, right? But one of my favorite words. You said the word fuck. Okay, and you said it's got so many uses, right? But by far, my favorite one is the word cunt.
Yo, I love that word too, but we're not allowed to say that in Canada. Well, Americans can't say it either. It's only you guys. I think can English people say it in England? Can they get
right? I believe that everyone should be able to say it. Okay, firstly, I understand that it could used in a derogatory sense. And it does have that use. But again, anything that is sufficiently good can be sufficiently bad, right? But I just love that word. It is an incredibly descriptive word that you can use for so many different things. And in Australia, it typically does get used for many things. So much so that even one of our states has it as a tongue-in-cheek marketing campaign, right? So we have a state in Australia called the Northern Territory. Well, it's a territory, right? But yeah, Northern Territory. So the initials for it are NT. Okay. And they have a marketing slogan called See You in the NT, right? So see you, and then in the is very small, and then it's NT. So it just looks like cunt. It's what it looks like. And it's so funny. But like that's a very Australian sense of humor. But yes, that is one of my favorite words when used appropriately. I don't try and use it in like a derogatory sense, but I like the way that you can use it as a descriptive word when it is really very different from what the denotative meaning is. The connotative meanings can be so different.
No, I agree. Like in terms of my favorite words, that's probably my number 2. It just feels so good to say. Like, yeah, can. It just feels so good to say. But yeah, like you said, if you're going to be using it in the sort of derogatory manner or an aggressive manner, when you're speaking to a female or someone who identifies as a female,
Yeah.
then yeah,
You got to be careful because some people wish they had one, right?
yeah,
They might
that's true.
sense that.
That's true.
Look, many friends that use the word, girls that use the word towards myself. I've used it, you can use it towards them in a very jovial sort of manner. I think part of the reason it is so satisfying is because it's so taboo and it is so shocking. So part of that's like the rebel, you just like to say it because it is so shocking. But I've found it a very good litmus test, right? Like it's a really good way to gauge some unique information about people. Like if you say the word cunt in front of them and they have a really shocking reaction, it tells you so much, right? Like it's such an easy test to get so much information out of somebody, right? Like have you found that? Like there's people that are just like, you said what?
Bro, I get off on shocking people. So yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I love that shit. I love shocking people or saying something. Yeah, just to get a rise out of people, not make them angry, but like, yo, I cannot believe you just said that. Like that was so left field. So I get it. I get that 100%.
All right. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to just give people who are listening who might not be familiar with this kind of stuff, some examples of how useful that word is, right? So in Australia, if you've got somebody that, is doing something that's pretty extreme or like you don't think that they could do it or it's quite risky, and then they do it, and a typical congratulation for someone doing that might be, fuck yeah, you mad cunt.
Fuck yeah, you mad cunt.
Someone's doing something that's really stupid and they do that stupid thing and it doesn't go the way that they were planning and this, like it's stupid that they did it. You go, you dumb cunt. So like, you can just use it in so many different ways. What's some other good examples? Have you got any favorites?
Oh, yeah. When you're sort of trying to, what's the word? Not admiring someone, but in a way, well, it's, yeah. Oh, what is it? No, I can't think of it now. I think I almost just made one up that didn't exist. I was about to say, what's that?
Well, I was going to say you could do sexy cunt.
Sexy cunt. Oh yeah. There you go. Oh, you sexy cunt. Yeah.
You're a good looking cunt, aren't you? Like
that's another one. That's another one. Yeah, that's another one.
See, it was on the mouth back down. Holy shit, you're a big cunt, Yeah, like the first. I'm not like this is legitimately happened. You walk up and people say, "Holy fuck, man, you're a big cunt," and it just go, boom. If you really try, yeah, absolutely. But if you try and think through it logically, you're just like, what the fuck is that saying? Like what?
Yeah, it's true,
right? Like, but you can't logically, you can't think through that and think like, wait, hold up. So like, I'm a big vagina. What does that mean? But like, it's a compliment. It's a term of endearment. But if you literally,
that's the word, endearment. That's what I was trying to say. That it's like an endearment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it has an incredibly broad scope.
I love that word. Another word I really like to say in private though, or with my really close friends is the N-bomb. I don't know what it is, just the way it rolls off the tongue. I don't know why. It just feels good saying that word. Obviously, not meaning anything by it, but for some reason, it's just like a fun word to say. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
You and every other white person in that car.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, black people know that white guys drop the N-bomb when black people aren't around. It's a known thing, but yeah, it's just like a delicate word to say in public or in a YouTube video or anywhere on social media, really. Like if you drop that, what's that?
It'll come back to get you like Joe Rogan.
Yeah. There you go. That's a perfect example. Yeah. It might even come back to get us, even though just because I'm mentioning that I've used it before, that I've said the word before, it might come back to
Yeah, you're a racist guy. That's
oh, right. Yeah. I'm racist because I was saying a word. Yeah.
correct. So, but the key point that you're making is you're not using it in a derogatory sense. That's not what's giving you the joy. What's giving you the joy is that it's actually an incredibly powerful term of endearment, right? Like it's like the other analogous thing would be like bro or brother or bra or, like any number of the bruv if you're from bruv if you're from England, mate, like those kinds of words. In it's very similar to that, but it's also a little bit more special because it's not commonly used in Caucasian circles, right? So it's got a little bit more speciality to it as well, and it's something about that it communicates. And there's a big difference in the N-bomb, right? In the way that you say it. So there's the very derogatory interpretation, which is like NI, the double GER version versus the double GA version is very different in their connotations, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's so strange that such a slight difference can change the power of a word, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. Like it's just become a really, like, we've kind of made it into this aggressive word that's something you can absolutely not say. And there's been a lot of words somewhat recently that have kind of gone into that category. The F word for someone that is gay was a very common word that we used to use as kids. Like we would just call someone that all the time. Like if they made a mistake on the soccer field or football field, right?
Yeah.
You would say, or
what does gay even have to do with my inability to do this sport?
yeah. Or if someone was sad about something, oh, yo, quit being such a, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. But look, it was on the female side as well, because you just, like you run like a girl. That was a very common thing for people to say. That was an insult, right? Whereas now, right? You can't, that doesn't even apply, right? Have you seen the latest, I watched a clip because they've banned biological men participating in some international athletics stuff, which I think is a good thing, right? If you want to have trans events, go for it. But anyway, run like a girl. Whereas now, man, you've got men that identify as women, biological men who identify as women, running in races, man. So that's not even an insult anymore, right? So some of the motherfuckers are fast.
Okay. I kind of want to jump back into,
we got to intro the pod.
All right. You go. You do it this time. I got faith in you, bro.
Welcome to another episode of Idiot Squared, where us, two idiots, well, complete and utter idiots, to be honest, try and figure what this is all about. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing communication. What is it? And a whole bunch of other stuff. We've already jumped in, so we're going to get straight back into it now.
Okay. Getting people to understand communication, like understand an idea, understand what you're trying to say to them. There's this barrier where someone will tell you, yes, I understand what you're saying, but they actually don't understand what you're saying. And you mentioned something last week, which we didn't end up publishing in the pod. Do you remember you opened up with something? You mentioned something about communication and how we can actually strive to improve how we communicate with people. And you had something about understanding. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. So if you seek to try and understand someone, well, I don't really remember 100%, but I think I know where we're going in this. If you understand that we're all fallible and that communication is error prone purely because of what you think or what you believe a word to mean could be different from what I believe a word to mean, etc. Then instead of trying, in order for me to understand, or in order for me to hear you, I have to make predictions about what your words are saying and meaning, right? And so instead of trying to, like, I'm butchering this. So the easiest way, I think, is understanding that communication is error prone. There is no such thing as perfect communication. And trying to develop a mutual understanding is the most important thing, right? And there's ways to do that. But as soon as you think you know, right, you've got the biggest chance of being wrong. One thing. But if you would like to go with what I said last week, I think that would help me significantly.
I can't remember what it was word for word, but from my understanding, what you were trying to say is that I think let's use an argument, for example, or a debate rather, right? If we're debating a topic and we're trying to get the other person to understand our point of view so they can at least consider it, they actually have to listen to your point and understand what your point is and apply your point in their mind in certain situations or examples in order to really gain an understanding of what you're trying to say, instead of just debate. This is my point. This is my stance. I'm not going to consider completely what you're saying. I'll hear you, but I'm continuing with my stance and I'm continuing having this argument. And there's this something that's not connecting, this wall that we are unable to break. And that wall sometimes can be ego. That wall can sometimes just be you're just in the heat of a battle and you just want to win. It can be many different things. And I find it so common in arguments and debates is that both sides, sometimes it's just one side, but a lot of times it's both sides, aren't opening themselves up to really consider the other point, because both parties could be right. One party could be 20% right, the other one 80, but still both parties have good points. And if we can just learn to sort of break that barrier and allow both parties to mesh, we could learn so much more and we could solve many more problems, I think.
Agreed. So, so I think what I was communicating was all communication and all observation is error prone, right? There's always errors. And so by knowing that, you can know that you're never 100% right, if that kind of makes sense. You know, like we can only ever approximate what happened or approximate the truth. We can never really know, so to speak. Okay. So with that, then that sort of implies that you need to maintain a willingness to be wrong, right? If you know that you're never perfect, you're never going to have the exact, like 100%, like non-fallible view of something, then it allows you to entertain the idea of being wrong. And if you have a willingness to be wrong, that allows you to then develop a deeper understanding. Okay, but if you're not willing to be wrong, then you can't make progress. All right. By definition, you've got it all. It's all figured out. You don't need to update that model. Now, each person has their own world model, right? Their own ideas about how the world works and the way that things are and why things do the way that they do, like what they do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all have a world model. Okay. And so part of why it's hard to bridge that gap is because part of the thing that creates that barrier is that unwillingness to update your world model, to think that your world model is 100% accurate, right? But we know it's not. It can't be. No one has a 100% accurate view of the world and the way that things work in the universe or anything else, okay? But when you think that it is, it creates this barrier, right? And so the only way to get rid of that barrier is to realize that we're all fallible, that we could all do better, and that there was always room for improvement. And then so that creates the space where you can acknowledge that you might be wrong about this. And so in doing that, you can then truly try and understand what the other person is saying. You can then try and hold that in your mind, right? And see, what would it mean if this was true? What would the implications be? If Polska was right and I'm wrong, what would that mean, right? But that's a very difficult thing to do because it does challenge your world model. But I think that's only a problem for people who don't think that they're fallible. they think that they've got it all right or all figured out. And I think that's a very dangerous thing, because none of us have it all right. None of us have it all figured out.
One effective thing that I've learned, and I've also noticed that you do this quite a bit as well, Ruben, is when you consider the other person's point of view or the information that they are communicating to you, and then you take what they're saying, right? And then you apply it to your own argument, right? You can get them to see a little bit more of a side that you are arguing by accepting what they're saying. We speak about that point of view, and then we sort of apply it in a different way. Not to say that your argument is 100% right. However, it's just a way where we can have sort of a more healthy way of communicating. I'm accepting what you're saying. Now let's apply to what you're saying to my example or my point of view, and let's see where that takes us, so we can both sort of go down this journey, learning together and not really being worried about who's right and wrong, because we're both trying to find the right answer. That should be the goal. I'm not trying to shut down your ideas and make you think the way I think. That's crazy, right? But like, let's go down this journey together, unite our ideas, and learn something new.
Yeah. So I think that's the only way we can make progress, is by battling those different ideas, opinions, viewpoints, etc. together, and seeing which ones are the most useful, which ones help us get to where we want to get to. Which is also why I'm willing, like I have a willingness to be wrong about many things. I'm happy to entertain, different ways of seeing the world. One, because I don't think I have it all figured out. I don't think I've maximized my experience of this world, this life, this universe, or anything else yet. And I think that's a good thing, because I've got so much more to look forward to, like things can get better.
So we had a real life example of this before, Rubes. We were talking about, so I was trying to hire someone to edit videos that I'm doing for mine and my wife's YouTube channel. Shout out Miss Bunny Nutrition and Miss Bunny House. Check them out.
But
anyways, yeah, thank you. But not before you subscribe to this channel, and make sure you give the video a like and comment. All right, we got that out of the way. So I was mentioning to you that we needed help, because we've had people ask us for help to edit their videos for some sort of promotional videos that they had for restaurants, for example. And I wanted to go to a university and go to a program, talk with the program coordinator. That's a coordinator of a program that sort of is in that realm of video production or recording, or I don't even know what the proper names would be for that type of study. But go to her, tell her we're looking for a student who's hungry, who wants to, have some experience editing videos. We'll pay them this and that. Present the idea to the class, try and find someone, right? And you mentioned, well, Polska, why don't you just make a post on a website, a service website? You can, make an account really easily. Then you can make sort of an ad, what you're looking for with the price, and discuss exactly what you're looking for. And then that can sort of work to your advantage when, it's working when you're sleeping, essentially, is what you said, right? And in that moment, I was being a little bit stubborn, and I was saying, yeah, but I have this idea, and I imagine this idea, and I would like to go to the university and sort of, because I really like interacting with people in the real world. That's something that I enjoy. And then you ask me, well, do you really have the time to do all that because you're so busy? And the answer is no, I don't. I don't really have the time to do that, even though it's really enjoyable to me and I would like to do that. You ended up being right in terms of in terms of my lifestyle, right? And it took you a few times convincing me of that before I was able to say, yeah, that is the best way forward. And it hurt me a little bit in that circumstance because I was being stubborn, and I don't like being stubborn, right? I don't like being that way, but we all make mistakes. And in that moment, I was making that mistake, not thinking things through rationally. I was sort of being emotional, just thinking, oh, it's going to be great going to university and speaking in front of these people looking for someone, which it just didn't actually rationally make sense for the moment and, the position that I'm in. By the way, we ended up putting an ad out. It went well. We found someone. So it ended up being a good idea.
Okay. But it wasn't that you were wrong, right? Your idea and the way that you wanted to do it was also right. And it's just a way. There's many different ways to get what you wanted. What was different about us having that conversation was you presented what you wanted. Okay. And then you presented a path that you had thought through and had defined would be the best path. And part of it was based off your ideals and this whole romantic idea about you're going to go to this university. There's going to be all these hungry kids that are going to want to do all this stuff, and you're going to present it. It's going to be this awesome big thing, blah, 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 blah. But there's many different things and factors that go into that, right? And as much as a nice idea as that is, there's also many other responsibilities and time and energy and logistics, geographic locations, blah, like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with it. Whereas if what you were just looking for was somebody, that was passionate about video editing to be able to edit your videos, I just presented that there's other paths. And you were sort of committed to that one path, but that's only because you thought through it. You fell in love with that idea, so you became attached to that idea. So it became part of your world model, right? And so the hard thing about that is going back into your world model and changing it. And that's that weird feeling that sort of, it's people call it friction or challenge or any number of different things, but that's part of it. And that's why it's so hard for people to change, because in the moment it feels really uncomfortable, because what's happening is you're actually having to change yourself or the way that you pass the universe, right, to get this new viewpoint. And that's a very uncomfortable sort of way of being. And part of that is because the whole thing that makes us people and humans and conscious is that we have this sort of consistent identity through time. We have this persistent idea of what it is to be us. Yeah. And so changing that, more than a few degrees can be very difficult, right? It's as if you're challenging everything it is to be you. And in some cases that can happen, like you can have these ego deaths that really dissolve the whole thing and you're lost for a bit. But yeah, that's essentially it. But it wasn't that you were wrong. That was not the case. It was just you presented what you wanted, and I was just sort of hypothesizing different paths you could go. And it just so turned out that other path worked really well for you.
Yeah, I think although sometimes taking friendly advice is difficult, it's something that we should really, really open ourselves up to consider, right? And obviously, like I find myself that I'm fairly good at accepting advice and listening to advice and considering it, even though I've had moments like that one where I was kind of being stubborn, explaining why I wanted to go, why I thought going to the university was better, but it was just because of this romantic idea. And so, for sure, it's difficult for everybody. However, the way that I've gotten better at it is by sort of destroying this ego within me, thinking that I always know what's best and I always know what's right, because there is nothing wrong with considering advice or taking other people's advice if it's good, right? Because what are you going to lose? Like nothing. The other person is not going to think that, oh, Daniel's weak because he's always taking my advice. No one's going to think that.
Well, yeah, I think there's some people that would for sure, but yeah, I know what you mean. On average, I don't think that's going to be the case. Okay, really important thing though. You can't listen to everybody, right? That would make things incredibly difficult. So you do have to filter this out, right? But you do have to become aware of your own biases and become aware enough of your own biases to identify like which ones hold you back and which ones don't. Yeah. And then, listening to what other people have to say can be very valuable, but could also be a large waste of time as well. Because, there's a famous saying, opinions, they're like assholes. Everyone has one. And so sometimes you got to be mindful of that. But what you were saying about the challenging part, I think is very important, right? And I use this as a general heuristic for myself. And that is, if it does not challenge you, it will not change you. Okay. So if you're perfectly happy with who you are, where you are, and what you're doing in your life, then what do you need to change for? Right? You don't really. It's only if you're not happy with those things does that even matter, right? And the things that will cause the biggest changes to you, by definition, should be the most challenging. Yeah. Like, so I use that challenge as a bit of a compass, right? So the more challenging something is to me or is to my worldview or whatever, I sort of tend to lean a little bit more towards that because I'm like, well, this is obviously, a big thing here. So I sort of try and lean into that. And I use challenge as my indicator. So if it's not very challenging, I'm a bit more likely to overlook it. The more challenging it is, the more I try and train myself to, oh, okay, I really need to look into this or lean into this a bit more because the fact it's so challenging.
You said something really, really important, is that we cannot be taking advice from everybody, right? And that's really important because, for the obvious reasons. However, how do we know who we can take advice from? Because I feel fairly comfortable taking advice from you, right? Because I feel like since I've gotten to know you, you have a good head on your shoulders. You tend to make good decisions and you analyze situations and you think things through. So I know when you're giving me advice, you're not going to be giving me advice that is going to sort of make things worse or harm me because you want the best for me. And I believe that. How can we identify those people in our lives?
It's tough. I have a heuristic on this as well. And it's lean into the people that challenge you, right? That's my sort of heuristic. The people, okay. Another heuristic, right? If it comforts you, look for the lie in it. If it challenges you, look for the truth in it. Okay. That seems really weird to most people the first time they hear that, but I'll say it again. If it comforts you, look for the lie. If it challenges you, look for the truth. Right? And the reason I use that as a heuristic is if someone says something that comforts me or makes me feel good, I try and look for the lie in it. And if I can't find one, I enjoy what it is that they've said. I embrace it. Okay. I embrace the compliment or I embrace whatever it is. Right. And if it challenges me, I try to look for the truth in it. I go, oh, why is that challenging me? Why is that causing this funky response? Or why is that so hard to hear? Or why am I not liking what they said? Or whatever it is. And I typically have found that when I do that, I develop a better understanding of myself and I'm able to calibrate in a more towards the person I want to be and more towards the outcomes that I'd like in life. Right. So how do you pick people? The answer is you can't really. It's really tough. You could be walking along the street and someone that you've completely written off, like, oh, that person's homeless or whatever. They might be able to drop a bomb of knowledge. You just never know. You can't, it's like stereotyping people. Very dangerous. Can be effective in certain circumstances, just like a BMI, right? BMI is terrible at accounting for fine-grained differences between body composition, right? But at a population scale, it can sort of be effective, right? It's the same as that stereotypes are the same, all the rest of it. So it's very difficult. What one way or a general rule you can sort of use is if someone is doing something or living a certain way that you might like to live, right? Then maybe listen to them. But then there's also like survivorship bias for the people that make it or get to where they are. The reason that they attribute their success might be completely different to why they actually were successful. A lot of people listen to very billionaires and people like that, or people that have made lots of money, and they go, oh, they give this advice. And some of their advice might be really useful to some people. Some of it might not be. But they might not be successful for those reasons. They might be attributing it to those reasons, but they could have just been successful because right time, right place. And no other reason other than that, right? Or right parents, that kind of thing. So it's a hard question. I don't have a definitive answer, but I think that once you engage with people, over time, you sort of develop a better understanding of that. but I would also be very, okay, this is the thing. So I would say that it's essential for someone to understand the difference between first level care and second level care. Because what I've observed with people is typically the average person leans into first level care and thinks that people that provide first level care to them are very nice. They're nice people. They're good people. They're this and that. And then people that do second level care are typically, they're mean, or they're this, or they're critical, or they criticize everything, or they're judgmental, or something like that, right? So quickly, what is first level care? What is second level care? First level care is, say, Polska, you don't have any fish, right? So I go and I catch a fish and I give you a fish, okay? And you're like, thanks, man, that's the best fish, appreciate it, all right? But you're dependent upon me for the fish, okay? Another thing would be is, I cook you, you can't cook, so I cook you dinner, right? You're like, thank you so much for cooking for me, it's really nice. Or you can't lift something, so I lift it for you. Thank you so much for lifting. That's first level care. Second level care is, I teach you how to fish so that you can catch those fish for yourself. Okay, it's hard to start with. You're not going to be good at it. It's going to take some time and energy to get better, but you actually end up having a mechanism to sustain yourself. And second level care is, I teach you how to cook, right? Or provide you with the resources so that you can learn how to cook. And all it requires is you to practice that, and then you have that skill forever. And the example with the lifting is, instead of, if it's urgent, I could lift it for you, but then I can teach you how to lift, or provide you with the resources or space to then learn how to lift. That's second level care, right? Second level care is so much better than first level care.
You said something interesting. People who challenge you, right? People who challenge you. Okay. I've seen a lot of circumstances where there is an issue. So you have a couple, right? So let's say our friend is having issues with his girlfriend, and he comes to us, right? And we're all, what's that?
Where did he get a girlfriend?
Who? Our friend?
Yeah. This is a hypothetical. This is not.
It's a hypothetical. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were making a joke, and I wasn't understanding the joke. And I was like, where's the joke?
I thought you were talking about a specific person, and I was like, that motherfucker got a girlfriend?
Oh, no, not yet. Okay. It's a hypothetical. So our friend has a girlfriend, and they're having lots of issues. He comes to us for advice, and we're just saying, yo, fuck that bitch. She's a dumb bitch. Yo, you can do better, this and that. And we're not at all making him see his own errors and why he might be the problem, or he might be part of the problem. We're not getting him to really see those things. And I see that so often with friends backing up their buddy or their girlfriend or whatever it may be. And it is not useful at all. Like just saying, fuck that bitch. Or when girls like, oh, he's a piece of shit. He's a liar. I told you he was a piece of shit. Okay, but that's not the whole story. It takes two to tango, and you are not being useful, nor are you helping that person, your friend. So,
yeah. Okay, so you're right. Like, I think you're right? But there's going to be the cases where they're absolutely correct in saying that, but like you said, it always takes two to tango. So of course you've created the space for this to happen. But sometimes that might be just the simplest way to deal with it. But my personal way of dealing with that is yes, I largely think that that's unhelpful, doing those sorts of things. But it's also harder to do the second level stuff. It's harder to ask you, to be like, well, this comes down to blame and ownership, right? It's infinitely easier to just blame someone else, right? It's harder to take the ownership, but by taking ownership, you are able to error correct your own world model, and that allows you to participate and see and live life in a significantly better, like higher resolution, right? Like it can completely change your outcomes. So I agree with you on that. And yes, that's something I've observed. Oh my God, I observed that. But like pick up a newspaper, man. It's the same thing happens in the news. Turn on the television. The same thing happens in the television. It's just like, they did this and that. It's like, it's probably two to tango there as well.
The media has become incredibly horrible at communication. The way they present things and the way they transmit information, it's crazy. I mean, if anyone out there is still watching the news other for entertainment purposes, please consider that every news is extremely biased, has an agenda, is bought by corporations, and is presenting it in a way that it's not telling the whole truth. It's the worst form of communication there is, in my opinion, presently. And it's so widespread.
Yeah. So this is another thing, though, is that it depends on how you define good, bad, worse, etc. Right? So there's a way we could argue that they've got really good at communication. They've found a way to hijack people's attention by feeding them these exaggerated, sensationalized headlines and this bias, completely, very one-dimensional view of something or very extreme version of something. So in that aspect, they've got really good at being able to communicate stuff to people because they've found a way to get their attention. The way that I think you and I both define, effective communication, I think they've got very bad at, like you said. And so, they don't typically, and I don't know if this is because they assume that the reader is silly or dumb, but they do not communicate the nuance. And the more you learn about anything, the more you realize how little we know for certain and how simple things are actually, there's a huge amount of nuance that goes into anything, especially simple things, which is the weirdest.
Have you ever heard or seen discussions in parliament or congressional hearings?
God,
dude, it is unwatchable.
Oh, exactly. It's painful to watch those things.
Yeah, it's crazy how many people in one room are just taking part in this form of communication that is so absurd. I can't. I've tried watching it a few times to see what is being talked about, what's going on. It's horrible. It's outrageous. Usually, your own party, if it's left versus right or whatever, the left party will be saying something, and then all the left people will be clapping and cheering. But what the person said is offensive, and it's not solving the problem. It's just trying to bash the other person, bring the other person down and not really focusing in on real issues. It's like they're saying things for an applause. I mean, it's kindergarten shit. It's outrageous. And it's the back and forth. Why are our tax dollars going to this? And why is there a judge? There's always this judge with his mallet, right? Order or whatever. Why is he there? What is he doing? He should be saying, guys, shut the fuck up and let's stick to the points. What is the issue? How are we going to solve this? How are we going to come together? But he does none of that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But this is because both parts of that camp have been indoctrinated to think that their world models are 100% accurate. And they're not willing to be wrong about this stuff. That's the crazy thing. I think it's a very low level of communication. I don't even know if you can really call it communication. I think we need to come up with a different word for just shouting your you're just completely, biased worldview or one-dimensional worldview. But yeah, it's bonkers. I can't believe that they get paid all that money to go and do that. It's embarrassing to watch. I must admit, I've tried to watch a few of these things and I haven't been able to sit through. It's embarrassing. It's very, very low level stuff. But yeah, it's crazy that that's the inner workings of our governments. It's crazy that anything happens, right? Is it not? But it also shows you that how sort of, even though you can have all of that sort of bad, not even trying to understand each other, just shouting your opinion and trying to mock people and all this other stuff, how progress can still happen and how things can still get done. It says a lot. Like, it's crazy how great. It's bonkers. So a good example. If you have anything you want to riff on, go on it. But I think we should definitely talk what communication actually is from like a definition standpoint, and then across a couple of different scales, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Fudge it.
All right. So I did a bit of work on this, just trying to develop a better understanding of what communication is. And so we've got a couple of things we can sort of say. So what is communication, right? And we want to think about this across various different levels of abstraction. I think I'll just move these screens. So we can broadly say communication is the process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, or feelings between individuals or groups through various channels, media, or modes. It can occur at different levels of abstraction, which we'll explore below. Right? So we have the basic level for humans, which is, at this level, communication is about the simple exchange of information. It can involve spoken words, written text, or nonverbal cues like facial expressions and body language. Examples include casual conversations, text messages, smile, a wave, all that kind of different stuff, right? So kind of simple. Then we have the intermediate level. If we're breaking them down into sort of different levels, communication becomes more complex and it starts to involve context and interpretation. This level includes not just the information being shared, but also the underlying meaning and intentions. It can involve multiple channels, right? So a channel is just like the mode you're choosing to use. So like verbal, nonverbal, written, etc. Sorry. So back to that. Channels such as verbal, nonverbal, or paraverbal, right? So paraverbal was the thing I had considered, but I forgot about, which is tone and pitch. Yeah. So like the way in which somebody says something with the tone, or whether their voice, whether or not their voice drops in volume or pitch, or goes up in pitch, can indicate whether they're excited or I'm excited, or I'm excited.
Yo, fuck you, man. Fuck you. Fuck you, man.
Exactly. Yeah. So paraverbal, way to describe it. Examples include sarcasm, humor, or empathy in conversations, right? Then we have an advanced level. At this level, communication becomes even more nuanced as it involves social and cultural aspects. It's shaped by factors like power dynamics, social norms, and cultural background. Communication is not just about the exchange of information, but also about the relationships, shared experiences, and values that influence the communication process. Examples include diplomacy, political speeches, or cross-cultural communication. Right. So I think a key thing to just put a pin in there is, in all of that, with that information communication, right? If we, instead of trying to be right, instead of trying to, quickly say we understand someone, actually trying to develop a mutual understanding of something, that's the key to having better communication. Actually trying to understand someone instead of worrying about being right or wrong. Okay. I think if we switch to that model, instead of worrying about being right and wrong, just trying to actually understand where they're coming from, or understand, make a big difference to things. So 2 more levels, and then we're done. Theoretical level. This level delves into the concepts and theories that underpin communication. It studies various models, approaches, and frameworks to understand communication in different contexts and in various elements, such as the sender, receiver, the message, the channel, the noise, and feedback. Examples include the Shannon-Weaver model, the Scram-Osgood circular model, and the transactional model of communication. Okay, so then we have meta-communication. This level of abstraction refers to the communication about communication itself. It involves the analysis of one's own or others' communication styles, patterns, or strategies, and how they impact the communication process. Examples include discussing communication barriers, reflecting on conversational dynamics, or evaluating the effectiveness of a message. That was just like a little bit of an overview of it, which I thought was really cool. And then we could just quickly touch on the different sort of types of communication that we can have as humans and with machines and things like that, if it's something you're interested in getting into.
Yeah. Is there more in that document about that?
Yeah, heaps. So I'll just quickly go in. So we have different mediums for communication. There are various mediums or channels through which communication can take place. Some of the most common mediums for communication include verbal communication. So you've got like, face-to-face, direct, over the internet, etc. You've got written communication, so we can write things down using symbols. We have non-verbal communication, which would be like facial expressions, body language, proxemics or something like that, conveying meaning through the use of physical space and distance, right? So someone, they're a bit off on you, they might stand back a bit further. Whereas if they really love you and they're like really in your face, they got like, hey man, how you going? Like right up in your grill. I'm a personal space guy.
So, okay, this is really interesting. I actually love this topic, reading body language. I feel body language is super, super interesting. There are situations where I'm speaking with someone and I'm in a rush and I don't know this person. They've stopped me on the street and they're speaking to me about something. And I'm trying to position myself like sort of away from them in the direction that I'm trying to go to try signal to them that I'm in a rush. And some people pick up on this, right? A lot of people don't. And I just find it really interesting because body language is so incredibly powerful. There's a lot of examples which don't always apply to every situation. A lot of people say that if someone's like sitting back with their arms crossed, they're sort of closed off to maybe considering some of your opinions or closed off to the conversation in some sort of way. I don't know if that one is generally applicable to all circumstances. There's another one people mention, which is if the door is over there, right? And we're in a group setting and my body like is facing the door or my feet are sort of facing the door is signaling that I'm uncomfortable or I'd like to leave or maybe let's like change the atmosphere or something along those lines, right? However, I've noticed that in a lot of situations, certain body signals do tell a lot, especially if the person is not wanting to talk to you. There are so many signals that they make and you can easily pick up on to realize, okay, this person is uncomfortable with the conversation and either wants to change the topic or just doesn't want to talk to me. One of the biggest ones is the look away. Oh yeah. Or oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And like the look away and then nudging like over kind of thing and turning their body away from you is a huge signal that they're uncomfortable with the conversation or they'd like to leave the conversation.
Yeah. So again, with body language and all that, it's an imperfect science, right? So even you looking at someone's body language, thinking you can infer exactly what their internal state is or what their intentions are, is not perfect. There's no way that it can be, right? So there's always going to be error. There's always going to, and you're just remembering that it is an imperfect thing, that it's fallible and all of the rest of it, and your observations are fallible, helps a lot with that. But yes, you can infer, you can essentially gain extra information if you consider all of those things. So interesting, and I think this is pretty well researched, but it's apparently like 93% of all communication is nonverbal, right? Even when we're talking. So we actually are taking different parts of the body language and everything else, and we're considering that, and that's helping to provide the context for us, which is also why it's, was quite difficult for machines to learn language and things like that because they don't have access to any of that currently. Real quick, I just got to do a pee real bad. I'll be like 30 seconds. All right. Be back. And a big part of that is, so if it's, let's say it is 93% of information is communicated non-verbally when we're having these discussions. That's a huge amount. That's so much information. There's so much room for errors, don't you think? Because somebody might, you might think someone doesn't want to talk to you, right? But they might have eaten some curry and they might have like a real burn and stomach pain. And that could be like their body could be signaling all this other stuff to you, which could change how you interpret what they're saying or how how you're perceiving it. So there's all these different things. Cat Williams has like a really funny bit on this, that stomach bug virus. You remember that?
I don't remember that one. Not coming to mind right now.
So he's
God,
talking about
Carolyn,
haters.
so.
But he's talking about haters, and he goes, and he uses the N word a lot. So he's like, those N words looking at you like they got that stomach bug virus look on their face. And he's like, does this face? And he goes, that's them haters. And what he's essentially saying is like, the way that they're looking at him, he can infer what they're thinking about him, so to speak, just from the way they're looking at him or their facial expression. Now, he might be right most of the time. People might be looking at him because they're haters, but you never know if someone's got a stomach bug or any number of different things that could also make them have that look on their face. They might be in pain. Like I know for myself that if I'm in pain, typically, like previously, it would change how I was or how I would interact with people. I'd be shorter, like I wouldn't have as much time and the rest of it. If I'm tired, it's the same. If I haven't slept well, it's the same. But the more I became self-aware about those things, I could then augment them. I could understand that, it's because I'm tired, I've got less, etc. And we spoke about this in a previous one, which is about judges, and sentence length cases. And, it's not necessarily what you did. It's when your hearing was being heard made a big difference on your sentence length because of lunch, essentially, like blood sugar levels, which is crazy.
What do you think about lying? Because I find just lying in general is just such a horrible way of communicating but it's also an easy way of communicating as well. Because this happened to me a lot when I was growing up. I'd always lie to my parents about things I was doing because I was afraid that they would be upset, right? Or they wouldn't understand. And the moment I realized that telling the truth was just so much easier and they weren't responding to a situation like I thought they were going to, it felt so much like I felt so much better. And this is sort of like a message that I kind of want to give people that are in relationships or are working. Like telling your partner or your boss the hard truth is a lot better than getting caught in a lie. Because getting caught in a lie, like everyone's experienced that. It's very hurtful. It's very detrimental. Even though the truth might hurt for a little bit, it hurts less and you get more respect.
Yeah. So lying is easy in the moment and hard in the long term, right? So lying's easy in the moment, but hard to maintain over time. It's very expensive to maintain lies over time. You have to remember all your lies. That's fucking tough. Whereas if you just speak your truth, then that's your truth. It is self-persistent. I think that's what truths are. They're self-persistent things. Lies are things that you need to maintain. They need artificial sort of effort to maintain that thing. But you hit on a really important thing, which is like things that are easy in the moment typically end up not being good long-term. They end up being expensive long-term as well. Things that are hard in the moment typically lead to better outcomes in the future and things getting easier over time. Like bite the bullet, just deal with it. Like understand that, I think there's a big misconception in life as well that like everyone should just be happy all the time, but that's not a lie. Like that would quickly become boring and nothing. You need the diversity. And so embracing that some things will be difficult and like leaning into that difficulty or that challenge, I've found to be very useful for myself. And that's all I can really say on it.
Yeah, me too. I concur completely. It feels much better telling the truth. Actually, I found that having those tough, awkward conversations has become something I sort of enjoy. I don't know why, but I've come to realize that having those really tough conversations where, I'm about to confront somebody about something or a situation or something that's like difficult that makes me a little bit nervous to talk about. As soon as I talk to the person about it in the most respectful way that I can, it feels really, really good. And I love that feeling. And it's kind of made me realize that, these awkward conversations are fun. Like I like them now.
Yeah. You've gone to another level. You've taken another level. So you've done a meta level of that. Now, because of how many times you've done it and the benefits it's provided to you, you now can know that when you're having this resistance or that challenge about having an awkward conversation or a difficult conversation, you know that it will lead to progress. You know that it will lead to better things, and now you can enjoy it. It's the same with the gym, right? Like initially you first go to the gym, it's really hard and it sucks. Like why the hell would you want to do this hard thing that you then get sore from afterwards? Like what the fuck, right? But then you do it enough and you realize like, holy shit, this is a way for me to change and augment my physical abilities, my capacity to do work, my robustness to handle physical stresses, like my energy levels, like all sorts of different things, how I feel about myself, all of that stuff. And so then you can learn to love the difficulty. And I think that when you can learn to love the difficulty and learn to love things that love you back, right, that give back to you, that really is a beautiful place to be in life.
So I've been in relationships where I haven't been very good at I wasn't lying, but I wasn't telling the person exactly how I felt, right? So there was an issue, and this issue was persisting. It was sort of like an ongoing thing, which I would ignore, and time would pass. Eventually I would get to the point where it would come up again, but in a way where it affected me more so than usual. Maybe I was just not as patient as I normally am, or I've had a rough day or whatever. And I blow up and I say, you always do this. You always do this. And it's annoying me. And I have enough of this. And the person should say, well, why haven't you told me this before? Why is this the first time I'm hearing it, right? And I think that's such a huge thing in relationships. If there's a situation, it's better to just not attack the situation, but is attack the right word? Like just,
I'd say address the situation.
Yeah, that's a better word.
As soon as it arises, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
By putting it, all you're doing is you're just committing yourself to more suffering over time.
Exactly.
But in life, like we can sweep things under the rug and sometimes they go away. I think typically they don't, but you can pretend that they do. And if you're able to sufficiently distract yourself, then you can sweep lots of things under your rug and not necessarily deal with them. But yeah, for me personally, it's like deal with it as soon as you identify it. I'm not perfect, right? Like I still put stuff off. But the more on myself that I am about that, and the more I deal with it in the moment, as much as it might not be, I don't want to have to do this, whatever. It's like, well, if you want the outcome, then you should be fully committed to do whatever you need to do to get the outcome. That's just simple. If you're going to have that logic, then you got to stick to it. You can't have it both ways, so to speak. So yeah, nip it in the butt is what I would say. Deal with it as soon as it arises and be honest. Like if there's another good quote, which is like, people don't lie to you, right? People don't lie to you. They lie to themselves in your presence. And that's honestly what's happening. That's really is what's happening. People, they're not lying to you. They're lying to themselves in your presence. And this is actually an interesting point because I've become very averse to people that do that, right? And I find it very difficult to allocate time or want to spend time with people that do that. It's not a complete like binary, like yes or no kind of thing. There's a scale there. And I typically have I have more time for younger people, like kids and things like that, because they don't have as much experience and training data, or they haven't had as much time to sort of figure or think through these things. Whereas with adults, it's less and less. So, the older they are and the more like that, I'm just like, yeah, no, I just can't justify the time.
Yeah, nipping it in the butt is a really, really good technique. Also, when you're going to nip it in the butt, the way you present the argument, the way you present the situation is vital. It is so important because the moment that you are showing anger in your tone or in the words that you are using, the other person will inherently not want to listen to the level they need to be listening to what you want to say and how you want to communicate it. So if it's a situation with your girlfriend or your wife, because those are typically the most difficult situations, arguments, I feel, because that's the person that you're with most of the time. So that's the person you have to be the most patient with as well. So when you are nipping something in the butt, you really have to calm yourself down completely to the point where you can think clearly and speak logically and not come off as attacking whatsoever. This has to be sort of a conversation that you would be having like friend to friend if a friend was sort of giving you or asking for your advice. And setting the tone is, I mean, it's just vital. Trying controlling your voice, not speaking too loudly, and try and speaking as calmly as you can, because any change in tone can drastically affect the way the person is, the person's perception of your argument.
So yes, I agree with you, but we also need to define how like that can also fall very short. Okay, so if somebody is themselves worked up and you say something in a very calm way, there's nothing stopping them from predicting that you're saying it aggressively. If that helps them justify how they're feeling, then they'll interpret you as being aggressive. It doesn't matter, or angry, right? So what you can do though, is if you start taking ownership for everything that you could possibly own, right? And instead of blaming other people, you start owning the things that you've done wrong or you could do better, right? That will intrinsically help the other person to start doing it for themselves, okay? But if you start blaming them and telling them that they're the problem, they're this, they're that, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all they're going to want to do is reciprocate that back to you and tell you how you're this, you're that, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so you don't get anywhere. And this is where I think a lot of communication falls down. Right? Whereas if you you go into that taking radical ownership of everything that you could do differently and all the things that you might have fucked up on and everything else, it makes people acknowledge, like it helps create the space for them to do the same thing, which is what you're trying to do when you're blaming them. You're trying to get them to take ownership of all that stuff. But by you pointing it out to them, it's only going to make them want to point out all your shit back to you. Does that kind of make sense? So, if you want someone to compliment you, right, start talking about all your flaws, all the things that you're bad at, all of your shortcomings, all of those flaws, okay? And then people will just want to compliment you, okay? They won't want to shit on you any further. Most of the time. There's some weird sadistic people, like friends that I have, that will keep shitting on you. And I like that, okay? But if you want people to insult you and rip on you or have a bad perception or, you know, like a shitty view of who you are, go in and just start talking about how good you are, right? And how awesome you are and how many accomplishments you've done and everything else. And watch people just try and chop you down. Watch them. It's an inverse thing, right? So if you want to talk to somebody and resolve an issue, start with radical ownership. Own all your own shit first, right? Don't point any blame to anyone other than yourself and see how far you get, right? If you want to keep having fights and getting nowhere, go in and start blaming everything on everybody else. That kind of makes sense? It's an inverse.
That is such solid advice, bro. Very well said, Ruse. Yeah, I agree. That is such good advice. And it kind of ties back to what we were saying before about effective communication in sort of a debate style or an argument, is considering the other person and not being afraid of being wrong. Like I think those might be the keys, right? If we combine not being afraid of being wrong, considering the other person's opinion, looking in the mirror and recognizing our own faults. What else do you want to put on that list?
Well, understanding that all communication is error prone, right? Nothing is perfect. No communication is perfect. So even though you use all the words that you want to use, understanding that the other person could have very different interpretations of those words. And that's just inherent in communication. So no communication is perfect.
So yeah, if we combine those four things that we mentioned, I think that can significantly improve your ability to communicate. Obviously, there's more. And if you know of any more, or if we missed something, you want to mention other things, please put it in the comments. We would love to read them and maybe even talk about them in a future episode about communication, because I think this is a really, really good topic, and it's like a limitless topic, I feel like.
Yeah, we didn't even touch. Like I put a 9 or well, how many pages? A very large document together for this. I think it was like 9 pages. We did half of the first page. Okay.
Sorry.
I have one thing that I would like people to try. Right. So if you watch this episode and you take anything away from it, just try this one thing, and please let us know how you go. Or turn it into a Twitter thread or something. So engage with, like when you're engaging with people, start some engagements. Like, so someone's typically hostile towards you. The next time you engage with them, just start ripping on yourself. Just start highlighting all your faults, all your flaws, all the things you do badly, and see how they respond or react. Okay. And is it what you predicted they would do, or is it different? Let us know. Okay. Now, if you're someone that everyone's always really nice to and everyone's kind and generous to you, whatever, start interacting and just start off by big noting yourself, talking yourself up, talking about all the good achievements you've done, how good you are and all the rest of it, and then see how they respond to you. It's an interesting thing, but I've used this in my own personal life. I can bias people to, be kind and generous to me with their words just by being willing to shit on myself. And it's like, it's a massive hack. Like, it's crazy how good this works. Like, I challenge you, Polska, to try this, like see how people respond or react to you when you shit on yourself, and see how different it is when you start talking yourself up.
I love that exercise. Okay, so I'm going to do it. So all of you watching, try and do it this week too. And we'll come back to this topic, see how it goes. Because I will try it, Rubes, and I'll let you know, and I'll let everyone know how it went in a future podcast, because that's a really cool social experiment that anyone could do.
It is definitely. That was a good pod, guy. I enjoyed it.
Yo, me too. Me too. Communication is a really, really cool topic, and something that
we're getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, bro. Well, see you next week then.
Indeed, guy. Hey, to all those listeners out there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the content with people you love and or hate.
Yeah, make sure to talk shit in the comments too. We welcome all the shit talking.
And remember, if you never fuck around, you'll never find out.
All right, peace, bro. Love you, dude.
Love you too, guy. Bye.